Welcome to the 21 Things You May Not Know About the Indian Act Virtual Pilgrimage. This is number 2 of 21 things. My name is Reverend John Borthwick, and I'm inviting my community to come with me in a virtual pilgrimage through Bob Joseph's book, 21 Things You May Not Know About the Indian Act. And so, number 2 today is Denied Women Status. Just a quote from the legislation that was passed in 1869. It says this: provided always that any Indian woman marrying any other than an Indian shall cease to be an Indian within the meaning of this act, nor shall the children issue of such a marriage be considered as Indians within the meaning of this act. Provided also that any Indian woman marrying an Indian of any other tribe, band, or body shall cease to be a member of the tribe, band, or body to which she formerly belonged, and become a member of the tribe, band, or body of which her husband is a member. And the children, issue of this marriage, shall belong to their father's tribe only. This is an act for the gradual enfranchisement of Indians in 1869. As one reads through this book, and it's short chapters on each of these 21 things you may not know, it continues to frustrate and disrupt and upset how we see the world, how we look at things, and maybe provide a better context, a better container, a better understanding of what Indigenous peoples have gone through and has been placed upon them through the Indian Act. As I read those words, and maybe if you want to go back and listen to those words again, or purchase the book and read those words over and over, you think about a society that, as we understand it from history, Indigenous culture was very much a matriarchal culture. There was great power and great influence and great wisdom that came from the women of their communities and of their society. And to dismiss all that with some government legislation, and to literally say that someone's status, and remember, we've talked a little bit in the first few episodes, we've talked about status as being how you're defined. A government is literally defining a woman who is an Indian as no longer an Indian under the Act. Basically dismissing who you are, your identity, through the Act of Parliament. And as Bob says in the book, and as we're very much aware, this kind of devaluing, dishonoring, dismissing of wisdom, the influence, the power, of women, Indigenous women, has made them more vulnerable, more at risk, coupled with residential school experience, has led to so much harm, has led to so much devastation within the Indigenous community, amongst women and girls. It's just stunning how this act has perpetrated this. And even with the amendments, as we are to understand them, amendments in 1985 and 2010, various amendments, what the amendments don't recognize is the incredible hurdles that a woman would have to go through, government red tape and all sorts of inequities, how to get to a place, to fill out all these forms, to navigate a government system just to claim some kind of status so that they can be under an act that is already oppressive. Just to do that. And it doesn't acknowledge the trauma, the mental health challenges, the vulnerability that exists for Indigenous women and girls in our society today. Because of an act that said that if you marry someone who's not an Indian, then you're no longer an Indian. I want to go back to something I mentioned in the first episode, our introduction, and it was great to be called out on this. And I recognized it immediately when I was called out on this. Now, to be fair to me, I'm not trying to be defensive, but to be fair to me, I was quoting a movie, Braveheart, and quoting sharing a scene. However, as with all historical fiction, we need to be clear that, you need to do the work. And I think this speaks to much of what we talk about when we talk about a variety of different things related to our history, our past. Do the work. Do the real work of finding out, are some of the things that we see in the media, are some of the things we see portrayed in movies real, true? Make sure. Because what they do is sometimes perpetuate biases. And so, yes, as a person of Scottish ancestry, I quoted the movie Braveheart because perhaps, even though I'm married to an English woman, I have a bias towards my people, and to watch a movie like Braveheart sort of made me remember a scene that spoke about First Night as a way of, essentially, this was about breeding out the Scots, using First Night as lords to have their first married night of one of the couples in their community, Scottish couple in their community, to be able to sleep with that woman as a way of sort of breeding out the Scots. There's no real evidence to say that this actually existed, that this was actually true, that this actually happened. It's in the books somewhere that these things sort of could have happened, but there's no evidence to say that Edward, the king that's portrayed in Braveheart, did this. So we need to be careful with our historical stuff, especially when we see it in movies. It's portrayed with a purpose and a point and all those kinds of things. But just to play on that a little bit, I mean, in our culture, we've seen how, and it's influenced a bit by religion, and all of this is, especially Christianity. I just did a wedding recently where the couple wanted to use two become one flesh. It's in the Bible. When someone gets married, a man will leave his family, and the two will become one in marriage. And you can see within the act that maybe a bit of this is playing off. If an Indian woman marries a man who's not an Indian, she becomes one with her husband, and somehow that oneness, and you can see the creeping of white supremacy here, that oneness becomes, she's no longer Indian. It almost washes her Indian status. It literally takes away her Indian status, but it washes her Indian away. And you have to wonder, not very hard, that that's part of the reason it's in there in the act, as a way of eliminating the number of people who would be defined as Indian under the act if people married people who were non-Indian. And we see that in some marriages in the past as well. We see this notion of somehow a woman takes a back seat to a man. Talk about male, patriarchal kinds of ways of thinking. Hoping that we're growing from that in our culture today. We've seen throughout our history the work, the sacrifice, the energy, the time, the courage that women have had to put forward just to have the ability to vote, to own property, to have equal status. I mean, if you do a deep dive on the status of women, even look at the United States today, what's on the books. My goodness. For nations and peoples who say that we're somehow civilized or somehow modern, or we're very open in their thinking, there's a lot of closed-mindedness. There's still a ton of inequity. There's still a variety of things that we need to think about in this way of our living. It's been placed again. This is the mirror the mirror that I want to reflect this with, has been placed into our laws, into our legislation, into government acts like the Indian Act. How did it get there? I think we know how. It's intentional. It's meant to be there. The system isn't broken. The system has been created and designed for a specific people to navigate it. That's why we need to think about ways of how do we get ourselves out of this? If we created this stuff, then we can dismantle it. We can change it, not just with little amendments, but we can, without revolution, not tearing it all down, maybe some things need to be teared down. But we certainly need to have the collective will to look at these things with a new kind of lens, a new way of seeing that will allow to lift up all people and allow them to be the people that they were born to be, desire to be, hope to be, want to be, how they would want to be defined as an individual, just how you would want to be defined as an individual. So hopefully, as we continue this virtual pilgrimage, as we raise up these 21 things, we'll see the reasons why we really need to find a new way of engaging with the Indigenous community and allowing them to be on equal footing. Equity can happen, that justice can occur. Maybe that might be a bigger step towards creating a better relationship that would be worthy of reconciliation that only comes with truth. We'll see you again on the 21 things you may not know about the Indian